The mortar rounds hadn't stopped for 6 minutes straight, and Corporal Ray Donnelly was screaming into a dead radio when someone finally asked the only question that mattered. "Does anybody here actually know how to shoot?" Nobody answered. Nobody except a small woman in thick glasses crouched behind a supply crate, who hadn't said more than 10 words since she'd arrived at the outpost 3 days ago. She stood up slowly, pulled a scratched case out from under a stack of ration boxes, and what was inside it would leave an entire combat unit speechless before the sun went down. And her name wasn't even the strangest part of what they'd learned that night. This story is a fictional military drama created for entertainment purposes. It does not depict real people, units, or historical events. The outpost at Coldwater Pass was barely holding. Private Maya Lindqvist pressed her back against a crumbling stone wall, dust raining onto her shoulders every time a shell landed close. Of the 19 soldiers who'd arrived at this position 4 days earlier, only 9 were still standing, and 2 of those were bleeding badly enough that they wouldn't last the hour without real medical help. Sergeant Donnelly crouched nearby, his jaw tight, blood crusted along one ear from a near miss that had taken out their last working radio antenna. Their position had been compromised from the start. What command called a light reconnaissance post had turned into a magnet for an enemy company that knew exactly where they were and exactly how few of them there were. No artillery support, no air cover, no way to call anyone for help. Donnelly's mind ran through every option he had left and came up with nothing good. Direct assault meant slaughter. Retreat meant exposing 9 wounded soldiers across open ground with nothing to cover their backs. What they needed was range. What they needed was someone who could thin the enemy out before things got close enough to be hopeless. "Does anybody here actually know how to shoot?" He roared the words out across the chaos, not really expecting an answer, just needing to say something into the noise so it didn't swallow him whole. Silence answered him, the kind of silence that exists only inside a much louder silence, the roar of combat going on uninterrupted while no human voice responded to his question. Then from behind a stack of supply crates near the eastern wall, a quiet shape moved. Private First Class Maya Lindqvist had been assigned to this unit as a communication specialist, transferred in only 3 days earlier from a desk job nobody had bothered explaining. She wore thick wireframe glasses that kept sliding down her nose, spoke in a voice barely above a whisper, and had spent most of those 3 days reading manuals nobody else cared about. Donnelly had exchanged maybe a dozen sentences with her total. She rose now without urgency, without panic, reaching for a battered hard case she'd kept tucked beneath the ration boxes since the day she arrived. "Lindqvist, get down," Donnelly started, but she wasn't listening, wasn't ducking. Her fingers worked the latches with a kind of calm precision that didn't belong anywhere near this much noise and blood. The case opened. Several soldiers actually stopped firing for a half-second to look. Resting inside on foam cut to its exact shape was a long, dark rifle unlike anything standard issue. A custom-fitted stock, a scope with adjustment dials that looked hand-calibrated rather than factory standard, and a barrel finished with a muzzle device none of them recognized. "Where the hell did a comms specialist get that?" someone muttered. Lindqvist didn't answer. She was already running her hands across the weapon with the unconscious fluency of someone who'd done this 10,000 times before, checking the chamber, testing the bolt, seating a magazine loaded with rounds that gleamed differently than standard ammunition. Donnelly crouched beside her, his confusion fighting with the desperate math of a man with 9 soldiers and no other options. "Who are you?" he asked. She looked up at him through those glasses, and for just a second, something flickered behind the lenses, something that wasn't fear and wasn't excitement either. "Someone who can end this," she said quietly. "If you let me." Another round impacted close enough to throw dirt across both of them. Donnelly made the only call he had left to make. "Do it," he said. Lindqvist nodded once and moved into position between 2 collapsed support beams, settling the rifle's bipod against stone with quiet, careful adjustments. Her whole posture had changed in the span of a breath. The quiet clerk who'd kept her eyes down for 3 days was gone, replaced by something focused and still in a way that made the soldiers nearest her go quiet too. "I need to know what I'm trusting here," Donnelly said. She didn't look away from her scope. 2 years ago, I trained in a classified long-range program, she said. Specialized targeting division. People didn't leave that program easily. I did, for reasons that don't matter right now. Donnelly felt something cold settle in his stomach, the particular feeling of a man realizing the situation he thought he understood had layers underneath it he hadn't seen. Before he could ask anything else, Lindqvist's body went still. Enemy spotter, she said. Tree line 900 meters. He's been tracking your position for the last minute. Donnelly raised binoculars and saw nothing but smoke and distant shapes. You're certain? Confirmed scope glint twice. He's about to call in coordinates on this exact spot. Target confirmed, Donnelly said. She exhaled halfway, found the stillness between heartbeats and squeezed the trigger. The rifle's report cracked across the battlefield like nothing the standard weapons around them had produced, and 900 meters away a shape folded backward into the brush. Target down, she said, her voice exactly as quiet as it had been a moment before. She was already cycling the bolt, scanning for the next threat before the first shot had finished echoing. What followed over the next 20 minutes became something the survivors would talk about for years, without ever quite agreeing on the details. Lindqvist found a machine gun position hidden behind rubble at 600 meters and put 2 rounds through the gap in their cover before they'd even located her muzzle flash. She tracked an officer directing the assault from behind an overturned vehicle and dropped him with a shot that bent around 800 meters of shifting crosswind like it was nothing. Every successful shot she called out flat and clinical, no satisfaction in her voice, no hesitation either. Corporal Thomas Reyes, crouched nearby reloading his rifle, kept stealing glances at her between shots. That's not training, he said to nobody in particular. That's something else entirely. The enemy advance, which had been pressing forward with total confidence 20 minutes earlier, began to fracture. Radio chatter on intercepted frequencies turned frantic. Officers were going down faster than they could be replaced, and the soldiers behind them were losing the coordinated rhythm that had made the assault so dangerous in the first place. Lindqvist, Donnelly said during a brief lull, you're not just picking off targets. You're taking apart their whole structure on purpose. She didn't look up from her scope. That's the only way this works, she said. One marksman against overwhelming odds only matters if every shot serves the bigger picture. It was Private Reyes who noticed the engraving first, during a moment when Lindqvist paused to clear a jam. Scratched faintly into the rifle's stock, almost worn away by years of handling, were 2 letters. He squinted at them and felt something cold crawl up his spine. ML, he whispered to Donnelly. Sergeant, you remember that briefing 18 months back? The one about a classified marksman program that supposedly didn't exist? They mentioned one call sign once and never again. Donnelly's blood went cold. What call sign? Mirage, Reyes said. They said Mirage was a ghost. Disappeared 2 years ago. Nobody knew if she was alive. They both looked at Lindqvist, who was already back behind her scope, already finding her next target like the conversation hadn't happened at all. The enemy commander, increasingly desperate, finally deployed smoke to mask a final push, but Lindqvist simply switched to a thermal attachment built into her optics that no standard scope carried, and the smoke became useless. She neutralized the remaining threats through the haze with mechanical precision, breaking what remained of the assault's cohesion entirely. By the time reinforcements finally broke through from the south an hour later, the enemy company had withdrawn in complete disarray, leaving behind a battlefield that should have ended in the deaths of everyone at Coldwater Pass. Instead, every wounded soldier survived long enough for evacuation. Donnelly found Lindqvist afterward, sitting quietly against a wall, field stripping her rifle with the same careful precision she'd used to fire it. Why did you hide who you were? He asked. She was quiet for a long moment. Because the last time I trusted my own judgment over an order, someone I loved didn't make it home in time, she said. I told myself I was done with all of it. Then today happened. Donnelly sat down beside her. You saved 9 lives today, he said. That has to count for something. She looked at her hands, steady despite everything they'd just done. It does, she said quietly. It's just not the only thing it costs. Word of what happened at Coldwater Pass spread through the ranks faster than any official report could move. Soldiers describing a quiet woman in glasses who'd turned an impossible battle around with a rifle nobody could explain, and a calm nobody could understand. Command eventually offered her full reinstatement into the program she'd left behind, full reactivation, any assignment she wanted. She accepted, but only on her own terms this time, refusing to disappear back into the shadows that had nearly cost her everything once already. Months later, she stood in front of a new class of trainees, her glasses still sliding down her nose, her voice still quiet, teaching them that precision was never really about the rifle. It's about the seconds before you decide to trust yourself completely, she told them, and whether you're willing to carry what happens after. Somewhere behind those words was a battlefield nobody at Coldwater Pass would ever forget, and a woman who'd proven that the loudest voice in the room is rarely the one that ends up mattering most. This story is a work of fiction created for entertainment. Any resemblance to real people, military units, organizations, or events is purely coincidental.